Kia ora, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Citizen A, where we wrap the week's current affairs with the best political team on television from a very, very, very Auckland perspective. Warning, we're as fair and balanced as Fox News. Joining me tonight on a revolving panel of bloggers and Auckland opinion shapers. Here's the grand old liberal lion of New Zealand political commentary, life member of the Socialist Council of Ents, blogger, author and folk singer, Chris Trotter. And he will inherit the Murray McCully human skin suit when whatever reptilian thing currently inhabiting Murray McCully finally dies. Far-right storm blogger and head of Slytherin House, Cameron Slater. Welcome to you both. Coming up tonight, issue 1. Has John Key run out of horsemen of the apocalypse to terrify New Zealanders with over Labour's dagger through the heart of growth capital gains tax? Issue 2, Axe Party racist meltdown. Is it the Christmas gift that just keeps giving? Issue 3 tonight, the police threaten an investigation into TVNZ after they highlight the bashing of a looter with Asperger's. Is it time to rein the police in? And we'll end the show on a final word, but let's kick things off with issue 1. Labour have managed through their soft launch of the capital gains tax to rope a dope a tired and increasingly shrill John Key to dominate media attention on the single issue, and have managed to frame the debate as capital gains tax versus asset privatisation. This election is on ideology, which will be difficult for mainstream media as the word ideology is banned from all current affairs shows. Chris, as Vernon Small pointed out in his column this week, John Key's attack on the capital gains tax has floundered. At first the idea was screaming backwards, then it wouldn't raise much cash at all, then it was a tax we already had, culminating in dagger through the heart of growth. Are National under pressure?
No, not yet. Not yet. I think they've mishandled this. I think they could have done a much better job of responding to the proposition of a capital gains tax. After all, a tax of this sort has been mooted, if not recommended, by a whole series of pretty high-powered investigative bodies. And I would have thought that Key's best line of attack would be to say, well, this is a very courageous move by the Labour Party in the finest tradition of a yes minister, when to say something was courageous was to say it was bat crazy. We have considered this, and one of the reasons that we've rejected it is because hitherto we've really not had buy-in from the major parties. If all of the major parties are in agreement on this, then perhaps it's worth
it. Would have been a smarter move,
worth considering. Now that would have completely cut the ground from under Labour, and I don't know what they would have done then. But instead, he seemed to be channeling John Wayne, who played the Centurion, you know.
He did a good job.
In the greatest story ever told, you know. When he suddenly realised, you know, oh my God, we have hung the Son of Man here. It was a sort of you know, apocalyptic theme that was coming through. And when he wasn't sort of channeling the apocalypse, he was channeling Shakespeare. You know, is this a dagger that I see before me? It really didn't strike me as the best response that was on offer to National.
Cam, I put to you last week that National have horribly miscalculated the support for a capital gains tax, and you laughed that off.
And polls
you
showed
scoffed,
that I was right.
And you did your little whale dance.
Polls showed that I was right.
This week, here's the list of people supporting the capital gains tax: the Dominion Post, NBR, Herald on Sunday, Gisborne Herald, Waikato Times, the Greens, the IMF, the OECD. Columnists like Paul Little, Mike Hoskins, Gordon Campbell, Anthony Hubbard, Patrick Smelly, Vernon Small, Corin Dan, Andrea Vance, John Hartville, Matthew Hooton, John Ruffin, Duncan Garner, John Armstrong, Bernard Hickey, Gareth Morgan, plus academic tax experts, economists and Treasury. And here's the list of people who agree with John Key. John Key, ACT, the IRD and you. That's a pretty lonely, ugly foursome, isn't it? I put to you, John Key has misjudged the New Zealand egalitarian character, hasn't it?
Well, you really shouldn't cut and paste lists of names that Robert Guyton puts on blogs, because he's woefully wrong on that, especially on Mike Hosking, who this morning put out an editorial on News Talk ZB's website that absolutely panned Labour, panned the capital gains tax, and labelled it simply as the politics of envy.
He was reminded where his paycheck came from. Okay, so but there is wider
you
support
point
than
out you point out the OECD there and say, well, they're all got it, so we should have it. If the majority of the OECD all have the death penalty, would you support the reintroduction of that?
The argument doesn't stand.
If the majority of the
OECD,
OECD doesn't have MMP as an electoral system, why does the Labor Party support
but
MMP?
they've miscalculated.
It's a bullshit answer.
John Key hasn't miscalculated.
No, I don't believe they have, and I'll
come
tell
on.
you why they haven't.
Come on, Cam, just a second. I mean, I can't let you away with that crack
No,
about,
go on,
about the OECD. I think the reason people refer to the OECD is because for many, many years, New Zealanders have been told, you know, that this tax is too complex, it would never raise enough revenue.
Given the way Labor's delivered it's true.
It was going to lead to all kinds of horrors. People refer to the OECD, I think, to perhaps reassure people that this is not an unusual tax. This is a tax that most developed countries have had for a very long time.
And I'll go on record as saying is I don't have a problem per se with a capital gains tax.
Oh, you don't?
As long as it's comprehensive.
Which this one is.
Which this one is?
No, there's too many exemptions already. Labor's even said we don't really know how it's going to work, so we'll have a working group.
Okay, so Chris, by framing the debate as asset privatisation versus capital gains tax, Labor has played the hand that defines this election, haven't they?
Well, that's what they'll be hoping.
Yeah.
And that's where they're
I think the problem with going into an election using a tax as your battering ram is that, you know, taxation is always regarded by the voter as a rather negative thing. You know, death and taxes are the things you can't avoid.
And sale of privatisation.
Now, the redeeming feature, of course, is that the National Party is offering to do something even less popular than,
well, the way
introducing
you guys pitch it, of course.
a new tax. And yet you would think, since the National Party has been promoting its partial privatisation policy for some time, there would have been some sort of reaction in the public opinion polls. And I imagine to Labor's deep consternation, you know, that has not happened. And
well, you bring up the
you know, and I'm wondering why, frankly.
Well, you bring up the opinion polls, and this is the problem that Labor's got. With their capital gains tax suggestion, with all of the loopholes that they've got built into it, the incredibly low percentage that they're putting on it, it's not going to raise the amount of money. But that doesn't really matter. It's irrelevant what Phil Goff said today. It's irrelevant what David Cunliffe said, because 70%, more than 70% of the electorate are not listening to Labor. They're listening to other political parties. And worse, 93% of the electorate aren't listening to Phil Goff. And so whatever they've said today and whatever they say in the next couple of days is going to be lost in static.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, they were able to hold the issue for 7 days with their soft sell. Quick question to both of you. How pissed off is Russell Norman right now that this cherished capital gains tax has been flogged off by Labor?
He won't be bothered by this at all.
He's actually looking more like the leader of the opposition.
Because, you know, this promises now to be something which eventually is going to happen. And just a point, Cam, about preferred Prime Minister polls. I'm old enough to remember when Norman Kirk was rating below 5% as preferred Prime Minister, right up until the moment he was elected Prime Minister in 1972.
And then the CIA killed him.
And this has been repeated over and over again.
Preferred
Prime Minister polls, almost always tell you the bloody obvious that the Prime Minister is preferred.
That's right. Who wins, who loses with the capital gains tax? Who wins, who loses?
Well, Labor's going to lose. They're not going to have the same. See, on one hand, they're wanting to not sell assets.
Yep.
They're not, and so in which case we can't expand the NZX. And on the other hand, anything that happens in the NZX, they're going to tax the buggery out.
Who wins, who loses?
If they can make the case Labor will certainly win this argument and may have a chance in the election, but they've got to make
Win
the
that
case.
argument, yeah. Issue 2, the ACT Party racist meltdown this week has been extraordinary to witness. On Friday, ACT placed a race-baiting Bribe the Tribe advert in newspapers claiming Maori radicals like Peter Sharples are threatening New Zealand. Don Brash then puts out a press release saying it's time this insidious cancer was diagnosed for what it is, a type of apartheid. Then on Saturday, John Ansell comments on Kiwi Blog that he is being gagged by the state suffocation, Maorification, feminazism, National Socialism and teacher unionism. Don Brash distances himself from those comments. Then Ansell goes further with David Fisher on Sunday, calling Key an idiot and claiming white people were offering themselves up for Maori to rape them. Don Brash then asked John to leave, with John calling ACT white cowards. Chris, I haven't seen such group self-mutilation since the Jim Jones massacre. What on earth is going on?
What I think happened was that John Ansell put a series of advertisements before Dr. Brash and John Boscawen.
And they balked?
And well, I think first of all they continued to second guess what Ansell was proposing, which from what I understand of Ansell is not something he particularly enjoys. And when they finally decided that they would run with a version of Ansell's advertisement, it was so redacted and it had lost what I believe was probably the most effective headline, which was about the Maorification of New Zealand, which I think was a very clever coinage on Ansell's part. And Ansell spat the dummy.
He does this every year.
He couldn't be bothered any longer providing advice to Dr. Brash and Mr. Boscawen. And like many sensitive artists, he was not content to cast his pearls before such reformist swine, so he walked away. But my feeling is that Ansell understands better than Brash what needs to be done. First and foremost, for ACT. ACT must break up the unified right-wing bloc, which ironically Dr. Brash was more responsible than any other person for pulling together. While that right-wing bloc remains united, ACT is frozen out. And so incidentally is United Future, and so is New Zealand First.
That's right.
And what I think Ansell grasps, because he's by no means an unintelligent man, and I think the campaign he ran for National, the Billboard campaign, was nothing short of inspired in 2005. I think he understands that ACT, if it's to survive, has to be bold enough to break up that right-wing bloc. In other words, it needs to carve out a chunk of the right, which they can then represent themselves. Now, you won't do that with mealy-mouthed propaganda.
Okay, but wasn't the problem, Cam, wasn't Rodney Hyde dumped as leader because of this redneck populism? Deborah Coddington now calls Brash a racist, and even Christine Rankin won't stand for them as a candidate. How do real ACT Party members who believe in the free market feel about this?
I disagree with you on why Rodney Hyde was dumped. That's a...
well, it was the redneck populism. It was this toxic brand, wasn't it?
You say redneck populism. I don't believe that's ever what Rodney Hyde was perceived as. He had lost his way.
Tough law and order nonsense?
That's nothing to do with redneck. I mean, you're trying to
brand...
brand...
on holiday with his girlfriend, and he didn't stop that fellow from the Sensible Sentencing Trust from being accepted as a candidate.
However,
those were the cardinal sins.
Those are the cardinal sins, and being caught essentially being a hypocrite. And it doesn't matter if you're a Labour politician being caught as a hypocrite. It does matter if you're the person who was running a perk-busting campaign.
How do real ACT Party MPs...
Well, I wouldn't call Deborah Coddington a real ACT Party person. She lasted one term in Parliament and was decidedly average at whatever she did. So I wouldn't call her that. I think that what Chris was talking about is correct, in that ACT needs to break the mould, and this is one of the foibles of MMP, is that it creates these niche parties on the fringes that have to be extreme one way or the other in some aspect in order to piss off 95% of the population to get 5% of them to listen. And that's what John Ansell is about. But Don Brash wants to be polite and nice. Now, he needs to get that ruthlessness that he used when he rolled Bill English, and the same ruthlessness when he rolled Rodney Hyde over the top of them, and he needs to start being a little bit more robust.
Here's something to both of you.
But
Here's something
sitting
to
in
both of you.
meetings with John Boscawen internally for hours
Yeah.
on end is not going to do
Here's
that.
something for both of you. The 5 press releases released since June, 4 were about race. Capital gains tax has been launched today. Where is ACT? They have become bogged down in race. They're a race party now, aren't
Well,
they?
that is a miscalculation on their part in that they planned this over several weeks to come out, and when all of the country was talking about taxation and
Yeah.
economic issues, Don Brash's credentials are on economic issues. If he had focused on that and had
They might have some
they'd had
credibility.
but by focusing on race, and I actually, if you read the words, or you call it racist, if you read the words of that ad, it is hardly racist.
It was inflammatory. Bribe a
Oh,
tribe?
look, people
Come
get upset at
But Cam,
stupid little
but
words these
Cam,
days. Honestly,
even apologising here and now, or at least attempting, to defend the wording. I think what John Ansell would say is, I don't give a rat's
No,
ass
that's right, he
whether you
doesn't.
call
I
me a
know that.
racist
Yeah,
or
yeah,
not.
yeah, he
And
doesn't.
that has to be the attitude.
It
The
does.
moment you step back, I mean, I think that Boscawen and Brash's problem is that they are respectable men, or at least they were.
well, they can't deliver it.
And they want to keep at least a foot in the camp of moderate, fair-minded people, and that
Well, then
is-
they'll lose.
Yeah, that's right. That is their mistake.
So you look at Hone
If-
Harawira.
yeah,
Hold
if
on,
you want to
is-
win this battle, if you want to break
have
up
to
that
be-
right
you have to
wing
be
bloc,
rude.
you can't be nice about it. There's
Is
no
Peter
nice way to
Sharples
do
a
this.
Māori radical? Is Peter Sharples
He
a Māori
wasn't
radical?
his time.
Come on,
Peter,
Uncle Peter.
Peter Sharples is very, very adept at coming across as the
Reasonable.
friendly uncle. Peter Sharples wants to rewrite New Zealand's constitution, and that's a pretty radical objective.
Seeing as we don't have one, that is.
When is Rodney Hyde running as an independent in Epsom? When is it?
He won't. He hasn't got the fire. He hasn't got the.
Is he completely quenched?
Absolutely, he's got other things to do, and he's sitting there laughing.
Rodney going to run for his independent?
I would be very surprised if
Who
Rodney.
wins and who loses by having this type of political advert in the debate?
Well, what wins is actually the ACT Party, because people like you nut off and go berserk in the media. No doubt on national radio you just went on and on and on about
it was an endless. It was like they actually added an extra
What
hour
you're
to
actually
the
doing,
programming.
what you're doing when you do that and have this huge outrage is you give them headlines, which is exactly what they needed, because they'd had several months with nothing.
Except that Dr. Brash, while he inspired the necessary aggrieved response, he
bottled
he
the-
deviated from the classic propagandist's handbook considerably by not being vehement enough in
Yeah.
his advocacy
bottled
of the
it.
position. That's right. I mean, if you want to break into the political conversation, you never compromise, you never step back, you are always
Helen
aggressive.
Clark never did.
Because people mistake aggressiveness for
Weakness.
rock solid belief. No, rock solid belief in
Hone's
the
showing that
rightness
today.
of your cause.
Hone's shown that today in Parliament, hasn't he? By being thrown out without getting sworn in because he wanted to swear on the.
That's
Tuesday
right,
Waitangi.
because there is always a group in society who will regard the vehemence of somebody's opponents as proof of the power of their
Yeah.
position.
I mean, ACT is in the same position that Mana is in, on the extremes, appealing to get 3, 4, 5% of the vote.
And actually, the
And it's a
amount,
valid
the amount
strategy.
of airtime, the amount of media time that particular advertisement has got is actually all the
It was
proof
worth
that,
the
that,
$50,000 they spent.
that John Ansell needed. He has proved his point even as he's walked out
Absolutely.
the door.
Although, lowering the debate to that tone, there was a certain.
There
question
is
mark
no
over that.
bottom
It's
line.
politics.
Thank
Bomber.
you, panel. Moving on with issue 3 tonight. The police threaten investigation into TVNZ after they highlight the bashing of a looter with Asperger's. Is it time to rein the New Zealand police in? Cam, when the case of Cornelius Aries Smith Vorkamp came up, you were the first to blog that he should be shot in the gut. A gut shot,
Not
if
him,
you
looters.
will. And I understand that's because the death is prolonged and painful. Oh, this is I went back. I checked. This is when his case came up.
Looters are pretty.
In light of
pretty
him
low
clearly
life.
having Asperger's syndrome, be it getting assaulted, locked up for 11 days, and denied diversion for his looting of 2 light bulb fixtures, do you think gut shots were maybe a redneck knee-jerk too far? Or do you still stand by that?
Well, I think looters perhaps should be gut shot at the time in maintaining law and order in an emergency situation. I think that what we've got here in this case, and we have to be careful on what we actually do say because it's still before the courts. But I think we've seen here a campaign by some connected media types, and if you actually have a look at some Twitter transcripts, you've got one particular luminary feeding information to a social commentator from the Dom Post, who's then feeding questions from this exact same ones to the political reporter, who's going and asking questions of the police minister's office, and then coming back and then chatting about it on Twitter, all in the open. You know, we've just had a News of the World type situation where we've got manipulation of media, and we've got the same thing happening here. In this case, while
is that your justification?
I'm not justifying anything. What I'm
Right.
saying is that we don't know the full facts. You keep saying that the police have bashed this guy, and yet there is not a complaint laid before the Police Complaints Authority. There isn't any investigation underway about the police because he hasn't actually done that. And then the details of his arrest and the people he was arrested with haven't come out in the media either.
Chris,
They're focused on Asperger's.
Let's
that's
move beyond the lynch mob and police cheerleaders and be adults here. We can all understand the immense stress these police officers were under. The worst natural disaster in their lifetimes had just occurred, placing them under unbelievable pressure. We can all envisage in our mind's eye what has happened here, how the assault, the taunting occurred, all in the heat of the moment, but surely cooler heads should have prevailed at police HQ, and the 11-day detention followed by denial of diversion, followed by threatening TVNZ with a criminal investigation. Is that an appropriate or inappropriate response?
Well, the first thing I'd say, you know, in defence perhaps of Cam's original position, is that there was a time when, if there was a natural disaster, it would be announced quite unequivocally that looters would be shot on site. I can remember instances of that in other parts of the world. So the abhorrence of looting in such circumstances is very old and quite understandable. What I think we've got here is a classic example of the way that the police mind focuses down on an individual and a particular offence. And because that focus is so tight, it starts to exclude from consideration all other information. And I think, you know, the police have been, I'm not quite sure what the word is by the judiciary. I mean, it has been suggested to them that diversion might be the appropriate response. And the police have steadfastly refused to take the hint.
It's not actually true in the information that I have. It's not actually true that diversion has been on offer. But there is a media campaign being run to try and force the police into accepting diversion, and they're happy to accept diversion.
Just a minute, Cam. Are you saying that a judge did not make that suggestion to the police?
The judge made the suggestion for
that's
diversion.
all I'm saying.
However, diversion has very tight rules on it.
All right.
And so the police have said, yes, we'll consider diversion, but we'd want to have these conditions on it. Now, funny how those conditions haven't come out in the media.
That's fine. All I'm saying is, and I think the threats against TVNZ bear this out, is that the police have become afflicted with the tunnel vision that so often afflicts police officers in a major case. And I think if the police were to stand back and to look at the situation and to try and see how their actions appear in the minds of the public and how distasteful their behaviour looks in the eyes of the public. I mean, this man was kept imprisoned for 11 days.
Well, so were a lot of people who were arrested around that time.
Yes, and something else happened too. I mean, there was a kind of perp walk organised in which the news media was complicit with the police, it seems to me. I mean, this is because the police, and I think the media was going along for the ride, were trying to say, we are going to treat looting with the utmost severity. And because that was their position at the beginning,
That's right.
and because I suspect the information which has emerged subsequently is an embarrassment to them, rather than accept that they've, perhaps in the case of this individual, made a mistake, they have just, dug deeper,
Quick
like
question
Alistair
to both of you. We have unquestioningly handed over vast amounts of influence to the sensible sentencing lynch mob and got tough on crime crap that has resulted in the prison industry Bill English described as a moral and fiscal failure. Have we also given police too much unquestioned power as well? They get a lot of power from these new search and surveillance powers.
Look, I think you're looking at it from a world view where the police are evil stormtroopers that are parading their way through the proletariat, and it's just
Although a good one, sure.
it's just simply not true. I think in this instance that we're talking about here, the most unfortunate thing is the way that some connected media people have decided to blame Asperger's for this whole situation,
Have we given too much power
without
to the police?
understanding the details.
Oh, the police always are at risk of going too far, because the sort of job that the police are asked to do is an extreme one. It puts them into extreme situations. They are constantly encountering individuals whose behaviour is extreme and incredibly dangerous and unpalatable. It's a risk that all police forces run, and unfortunately from time to time they succumb to.
Final word, Cam, your final word this week is?
My final word is to the Labour Party, and they really honestly need to stop being so complex in everything that they do. Politics is actually very simple and it's very gut, and they're still maintaining the Clark era intellectualisation of politics, and 70% of the population right now aren't listening to them, and that would suggest that their message is not going to get heard, and they really need to fall back on the Ronald Reagan message. Are you any better off now, after 3 years of National, than you were under Labour? And if they do that, that will resonate and that will get them across the line.
Send your invoice to Phil Goff. Chris, your final word this week is?
Oh, I just want to pay tribute to Nick Davies and The Guardian in the United Kingdom for exposing what had been going on at the News of the World and Inside News International.
Astounding.
To see Rupert Murdoch today withdraw his bid to purchase Sky B outright was marvellous, and to see the whole of the UK Parliament united and finally dealing to this overmighty subject was really heartwarming.
Yeah, it was. Thank you, Cam. Thank you, Chris. Ladies and gentlemen, to my final word, Mr. Key has misjudged the egalitarian nature of New Zealanders. A capital gains tax is not the bogeyman he and his wealth class are attempting to spin it as. New Zealanders accept their social obligation because that obligation has been forged in fires far deeper than John Key's multi-millionaire pockets. On the battlefields where New Zealand's honour was tested, when the rich and the poor of New Zealand stood shoulder to shoulder and held the line, where the responsibility of democracy was equally shared, so too they decided, will the fruits of that democracy be shared as well. Our redistributive tax system, that is the backbone of our egalitarianism, cannot be easily swayed by the vacant optimism of the free market that so kindles the light in our optimist prime's eyes. We see the poverty, we see the need in our fellow citizen, and we see the corporate welfare that has replaced social welfare. This election will be for the ideological heart and soul of New Zealand, and come November, we will see if those bonds of social obligation go beyond the empty aspiration of the elites. If you like tonight's show, please join our Citizen A Facebook site and connect with other like-minded news citizens, and follow me on my Citizen Bomber Twitter and Facebook page. Thanks for watching from Whānau. Good night, Aotearoa.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.